All right, welcome back to another installment of the Wide Right Podcast. I'm Manny Navarro, Miami Hurricanes beat writer for The Athletic. It's Friday around 2:30 p.m. here on August 26th. We're about 8 days away from the season kickoff for the Miami Hurricanes, and Carlos Ledo of the MIA All Day Podcast has joined me once again to help preview the start of the season. Carlos, you're in the pickup line again. What are you doing?
Waiting to get my daughter, man. I got here a little bit early, so I'm not at the ass end of the line, and I could just get right home after I pick her up because it's Friday. And like the saying says, es viernes, el cuerpo lo sabe. So I'm ready to get out of here and get going.
Well, I appreciate you joining me for another podcast episode. I felt
Also, just
obligated.
for men alert, got a little gray growing in. But see, now I've got the au natural salt and pepper look instead of the Santa Claus look. In a couple of weeks, about a week or two, I'm going to have to dye that up again.
I like the fact that we can see the time change, by the way. We did this a week ago. It was black.
See?
So this is how long it really lasts. It's about a week, roughly.
A couple of weeks, yeah, more or less, before it starts growing in. Those gray hairs are persistent, my man. They don't stop.
They don't go away. Speaking of gray hairs, I'm curious, how many are you going to have on your chin? Not because of old age, but because the wide receiver room doesn't seem to get their act together here. It seems like they've really been struggling to hold on to the ball throughout camp. Mario's made no secret about it. And to me, that seems like the biggest question mark heading into the season.
Yeah, I mean, I went from concerned to nervous to now they've got me sweating like a hooker in church on Sunday. This is not good. It's not good. You have an elite quarterback, probably the best quarterback you've had in quite a while, more than a decade, I could say that. Brad Kaya is probably the only guy that's come close to TBD, and I think TBD's got better skills in terms of his overall skill set than Brad Kaya, and I think his ceiling is higher. And then what you're giving him in return is you've got a receiver room that just can't operate the way he needs them to be fully effective. You need guys that can be able to get down the field and get open. I mean, you don't necessarily have to have guys that are burners that are constantly behind the defense, but you need guys to hang on to the football. If you at least have possession guys that can catch it consistently, you'll move the chains. But they don't even have that right now, and that's very concerning. And yes, they can get so far using the tight ends and the running backs and trying to use things and be a little bit more creative in the passing game. But if they're dropping wide open balls, even if you're scheming guys up wide open, and it's not about 50-50 balls, it's just about simple catches, that's a major issue.
Yeah, and I don't know how you fix it other than you have two warm-up games, essentially, with Southern Miss and Bethune-Cookman to get your act together before you have to go on the road to College Station and play a real team, play a top 10 team. Miami's look, I'm worried about the position in the sense that I for sure thought Frank Ladson or Keyshawn Smith or Richard Smith or Jacoby George or somebody was going to emerge in camp, and this wasn't going to be an issue. It's still an issue coming out of camp, but I will say, of all the issues, it's really the only one that I'm worried about. Yes, I'm a little concerned about the running back position depth, but Mario Cristobal provided some good news yesterday when I asked him about Don Chaney, if he thinks he'll be back at some point this season. He said yes. He said the injury is weeks, not necessarily for the whole year, like it probably is for Trevante Citizen. So it's an injured hip for Chaney. I know somebody mentioned to me that he was spotted around campus walking around with a walker because I guess whatever procedure he had done to fix his hip, requires safety. Requires him to take it slow and easy here. But I think, you can at least feel a little bit better believing, right? Mario Cristobal is saying that he will be back at some point. So let's say, for instance, Don comes back at the halfway point of the year. That's better than not having him at all and just going into a season knowing you've got three healthy scholarship backs and a couple of walk-ons that they like. So I think that's some good news. And I would say, my other biggest concerns were, is the secondary going to improve? Are they going to be better at doing their job? Are they going to keep blowing coverages? I've heard nothing but great reviews from the secondary. And then linebacker, Caleb Johnson has really emerged as somebody who I think they can count on, which is what they were hoping for, the kid out of UCLA that they got. And then you have some other guys that are looking a lot better with a fearsome front four in front of them. So I think defensively, Miami's going to be improved. It's the receiver position that's the one concern heading into the season.
Right. And I think at this point, what you need to look towards is if these guys can't get it done in the first couple of weeks, if they can't show that consistency catching the football, and specifically the guys on the outside, like Keyshawn Smith, Frank Ladson, like Jacoby George, Romello Brinson, all these guys that are burners on the outside, If they can't be consistent, then you need to adjust your approach and then get those guys in there that may not be burners, but can be more consistent catching the football, like Colby Young once he gets up to speed with the playbook, and Michael Redding, and seeing what happens there. And then obviously using Broussard Smith as much as you can in a hybrid role to be able to get him the football in space.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Josh Gaddis is going to do a good job of that. He figured things out in his 3 years at Michigan, how to eventually get the offense humming the way it is. And if the running game is as good as they think it's going to be, then it's going to take some pressure off of Tyler. But, I had a conversation with David Lake of 247 Sports the other day, and, he asked me, he says, I'm leaning towards 10-2, that's his prediction for the season. And I said, I was at 10-2. I'm kind of leaning back the other way now towards 9-3, 8-4, because not only the injuries and the situation at receiver, right, for Miami, but I would say, I think in some ways we've kind of underestimated some of these other ACC teams, like a Pittsburgh, even in North Carolina, who I know struggled last year and went 6-7. And Florida State, you would expect is going to take some steps forward in year 3 under their new head coach. They went out, they got 14 transfers. So the more I've kind of learned about some of these other ACC teams and what they've actually got on paper and what they're bringing back and who's doing well in camp, etc., I'm like, I can't sit here and say, well, Miami's just going to steamroll through the ACC. I think that's the way Kelvin Harris and a lot of old school Canes always are going to look at it, right? You can just steamroll. But we know better being in this conference now, since 2004, going on 18 full seasons. It's never been easy for Miami to get through the conference. They don't just show up and blow out every ACC team they play. It's never been that way. And so I think one thing I would caution fans about is you can certainly be very excited about this upcoming season, but you also have to remember where this program was. And as good as Mario and his staff might be, better in terms of what they bring to the table, experience, leadership, etc., all the things that you want out of these guys. The players still have to go out there and do what they're supposed to do. And,
yeah,
there's a lot of unproven guys on this team, a lot of unproven guys.
And one thing is doing it in practice and scrimmages and stuff like that. And the other thing is when the lights come on, because we've seen a bunch of times when, we get these pre-camp reports or these camp reports before the season, and we hear how great guys look, and then the lights turn on and they're just lost and they're not there. Some guys just can't handle that pressure when the lights come on. So it all depends. You've got to see how these guys perform in games to see how they step up. And again, yes, the frontline talent on some of these position groups might be very good. But if you're hit with an injury bug and that second level talent isn't there, then that becomes a problem. So you're a little thin in certain positions, you're deep at others. The key is, can you make it throughout the season without a major injury? Can you have guys step up where they need to step up, where they weren't doing it last year? And at the same time, how do you handle the adversity that comes with having an off game? Because they're not going to be on every game. TVD is not going to be, lighting up the scoreboard every single game. He's going to have games where he throws 2 or 3 interceptions maybe. And that happened last season. How do you bounce back from that in-game adversity to be able to overcome and win? I think the danger might also be, like I said now, is if they are steamrolling early on in the ACC schedule and they get caught in a tough battle, what happens then? How do they react? With this coaching staff, I imagine they'd react well, but that's something they have to overcome. And again, I wouldn't sleep on Florida State. I wouldn't sleep on Pittsburgh. I wouldn't sleep on anybody in the ACC schedule other than Duke or just, those menial teams, because at the end of the day, this team hasn't proven it in the past. I mean, they've been way more talented than their ACC schedule in the past and have laid eggs left and right. And this is Mario's first year. He's trying to get this thing going. And there's only so much he can do. He can't play for these guys. He can't be the one that suits up, puts the pads on, and shows them what it's like and what the intensity level needs to be. These guys need to do it themselves. And there's still a lot of guys that are remaining from the previous coaching staff that didn't do that while they were here. They haven't done that in the past. They haven't shown that light switch is going to be consistently on. It's always been on and off. Like a guy like DJ Ivey and guys, like Corey Flagg, can he do it on a consistent basis? What's that offensive line going to look like? Are they going to be more consistent? Because, yeah, they were great in pass protection last year, and they're supposed to be improved this year, but they've got to prove it. They got to prove it in the run game. They haven't shown it yet. And now with the lack of depth at the running back position and the situation of receiver, they're going to be counted on more heavily, and they're going to be facing different fronts now because the receivers can't catch the ball, which is another problem. Because what happens is when you can't get those receivers downfield, now the defenses start compressing, covering less of the field, trusting their DBs more in man, because they figure, shit, if you get beat, it doesn't matter. This guy can't catch the ball. We'll run the risk, but we'll load the box and make you beat us downfield or make you move 8 or 9 guys out of the box when you run the football.
I wrote a couple different stories this week for The Athletic, and there's other ones that I've been working on. One of them was, to kind of get the gauge of the fan interest for this season. And, I stopped by All Canes. I drove past Caneswear a little while ago up here in Broward, with All Canes right there next to campus.
And
Talked
you
to
didn't
Harry.
get me anything.
Didn't
You
get
stopped
you
in both
anything, bro.
places.
I
You
know.
get me shit.
I'm terrible. I was there for
Appreciate it.
business only, not for buying stuff. But I talked to Harry Rothwell for a long time yesterday, just about what fans are sort of talking about. Obviously, all the current thoughts are on wide receiver, running back. But one thing Harry brought up, and this will probably be mentioned in my story, is home attendance. And Carlos, you and I know well. I mean, Miami fans, even when this program has been great, winning national championships, unless it's a top 25 team or a rival who comes to town, that stadium could be empty. And Miami season ticket sales. Dan Radakovich went on WQAM this week. The new athletic director who came over from Clemson, and he said that season ticket sales are up about 6,000, and there's about 35,000 season tickets sold. But these first two kickoffs, okay, you got 3:30 against Bethune-Cookman, you got noon against Southern Miss before you have the Texas A&M game. We know the fan base. Just because a ticket sold doesn't mean there's going to be actual bodies there. And
Yep.
not that fans fan support will let a team down, or the kids won't feel it. But I certainly think that it's important sometimes to have that backing, right? To feel the love, to feel the support if you're a player. And Miami, yes, they hired the new football coach, and I expect people to be there early on. But this is a thing where if this university is going to continue to spend money and invest in football, right? Like, not just say, hey, we're going to throw a bunch of money at football because we have it now. We paid off the hospital bills, and we can afford it. But to actually continue to invest in it, I'm talking about 4, 5, 6 years down the line, they're going to need the fan response. And I guess my question to you is, you've probably talked to other Canes fans. You're plugged in. What are people saying? Are they going to games? What's the response that you're getting?
Yeah, like I've talked to a bunch of people and they've told me they bought season tickets now, and everybody's excited about the season, and I've been offered tickets to games. But I mean, you look at the numbers. Yeah, it only went up 6,000. Really, that's not a huge jump, and that gets you to 35, which is again not even half of the stadium,
Right.
or just about the half of the stadium, if not a little bit less. So it's not like it's a huge crowd that's already guaranteed to be locked into that, even if everybody goes. I have been hearing a lot of people excited about going to Bethune-Cookman. I imagine they're going to have a bigger crowd for Bethune than they would Southern Miss for two reasons. One, it's the first game of the season, the first game of the Mario era, and everybody wants to say they were at that first game under the Mario era when everything got kicked off and everything got turned around and the program got righted. And the second thing is it's a noon game against Southern Miss. And as you know, South Florida weather, early September, noon, not fun. Not fun. Especially the early morning tailgate of having to start at 8 a.m. Not a lot of fun. I'm down with croquetas and beer, but that's always not always the best thing.
Right. Well, I over the summer, one of my projects was looking at some of these attendance figures for Miami over the years, and this is just going back to 2014, the playoff era. Um, in 2018, which was the last year Mark Richt was the coach, they averaged 61,000 fans. Then obviously in 2019, the number took a hit, went back to 43,000. Then we had COVID, and then 43,000 average in 2021. So 67% of the stadium full for those games, 95% full in 2018, which that average 61,000 is probably one of the best ever for Miami. So it's not like fans won't show up. That was coming off the 2017 season, right? When they
Right.
had gone 10-3. So there was a lot of excitement. And you had some good home games that year as well. But I just think, if you're a Miami fan, you're listening to this, my advice to you would be, while Rudy Fernandez and Miami's administration is putting money into it now, I think, being invested in this thing means going to games on Saturdays and showing up. And that's what's going to show them in 3 or 4 years from now whether or not to keep investing. Because whether Mario wins or not, like, that's going to matter to them. How many tickets are sold, how packed the stadium is, how much influence the winning has. So all of that to me goes hand in hand. And again, look, I'm not trying to get on my soapbox here and tell everybody you got to spend hundreds of dollars on tickets every year, but go to a couple games, right? Like at least support the program in some way, maybe that you haven't in the past. And I get it. The last 2 decades have sucked, right? It's been hard to be a Miami fan, a bunch of coaching turnover, etc. But I really do think that people are going to be watching and paying attention to see the gate and to see how many people show up to these games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a return on investment. They want to see, I'm not just going to be shoveling money into an oven, right, into a furnace and letting it burn. We want to see some sort of a return, some sort of a level of interest in what it is we're doing. Because if not, then what's the point? If all we're doing is throwing money into a furnace and nobody cares, nobody's coming out, even if we're winning, then what's the point? But I think, as you said, with the attendance numbers in 18, if Mario starts winning early and if this thing starts trending, you'll see as the season goes on, higher attendance figures. And then obviously, if they have a successful season this season, next year those season ticket numbers will shoot up. I think what ends up happening with the Miami fan base, with the season ticket numbers and the attendance, is just like what happens with the Marlins, man. They've been burned so many times. They've been up 4 seasons. They've been excited about the potential, the outcome, and then the product gets on the field and they just underwhelm. They disappoint. And it's highly frustrating. And people think, why should I invest my money and my time and going out to these games if it's the same old story? I'm going to wait back. I'm going to wait and see to see if it's real, that this thing really has changed, if this program really is trending in a different direction. And then I'll go and I'll spend my money. And then I'll go out there to the game and do the things that I need to do to be able to just attend the football game, get there early, park, do the tailgate, leave after the game, the traffic, all that stuff, and spend time away from, other things that you could be doing to be there at the stadium to root this team on. But they need to see something from the team first before they start investing that way with their time. But I think they'll see it soon. I hope.
You're a guy who's invested plenty of money in Hurricane merchandise. I've been to your house. I've seen the purchases. Are you going to any games this year? Did you buy tickets for any game?
I don't buy season tickets anymore. I haven't bought them in a long time just because I have a family and it's hard for me to go out there. And my wife and I go together, and that's why it's hard. So, she and I are, as you know, are diehard Hurricanes fans. So if we can't go together, if only one of us can go, we don't go. And I don't like taking my daughter to the games yet. I've taken her to one just because how the environment can be out there. It could be a little crazy. But my favorite kinds of games to go to later on in life are not the high end Notre Dame, Florida State. I prefer going to a Bethune game because I can go tailgate, get destroyed, not remember the outcome, and just be like, all right, cool. We knew we were going to win anyway. So I could just have a great time with friends at the game and enjoy it and celebrate it as it's going on. But eventually that leaves the short-term memory and I have to read about the game the next day. Right. But those are my favorite kinds of games because it's a guaranteed win and I'm going to have a good time. The other games, the more important games, I now prefer to watch them at home because I like to analyze everything that's going on. I like to be in tune with it. And now that we're doing podcasts together and I'm doing my own podcast, I want to be of clear mind to be able to write notes down and make sure I understand everything that's going on to be able to regurgitate that later.
So you're a professional now. You don't have time to go and get drunk with everybody else at the games.
Well, listen, I get drunk at the house. I mean, I'm a professional home tailgater at this point.
Right. I would like to be too. I would prefer to write my stories drunk. I'm sure they would come out a lot better probably than whatever I write sober. Unfortunately, those aren't the people who pay the bills. If Miller Lite wants to sponsor us and send me a case before every game, I'll happily accept it.
And listen, I've heard your drunken prose. It is much better.
Couple of other things I wrote this week for The Athletic. That'll be coming out next week, the fan story. But in terms of, talent, right? Every year, the question I always hear, Carlos, is, well, we have plenty of talent. We have all these great recruiting classes, yada, 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 right? Well, I just finished putting one out today on blue chip ratios. One of the writers who has done this a long time in terms of like breaking college rosters down and looking at recruiting is Bud Elliott from 247 Sports. And I know Bud, he worked in the state of Florida here covering recruiting in high school football for a while. And he works for 247 Sports now. And, he put out a list back in July of the 15 teams that have enough talent, meaning half of their roster or more is 5- and 4-star recruits. And Miami was initially on that list. Now, I talked to Bud. I messaged him on Twitter the other night and I said, hey, when you do these lists, do you actually go off of the roster or do you just look at the 4 signing classes, right? Like the 4 previous signing classes. He said, no, I just look at the 4 previous signing classes. So obviously that doesn't take into account attrition, players who leave, transfer, etc. So I did that. I went to 247's website. I looked at every single roster. A lot of them didn't have the freshmen added in from last year yet. They had the holdover players, but it wasn't updated. So I had to update each roster. I did it for every single Power 5 team. and there's only 11 teams that have rosters better than 50% of blue chips. You want to guess who the 11 are?
All right, I'm going to go Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, LSU, maybe Ohio State, Michigan, Texas, Texas A&M, Florida, Miami, and USC.
Well, Miami's not on the list. Neither is LSU, and I think you said Michigan. They just missed the cut. They just missed the cut. It's Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Texas A&M, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Oregon, Clemson, Florida, and Penn State. Those are the only ones that have better than 50% blue chips on their roster. And if you look at the data, I mean, really, you look at the last 5 schools to win national championships since the college football playoff began, every single one of those rosters had 52% or better blue chip ratio, meaning more than half the roster, right? I mean, and some of them was way high. I mean, you look at Alabama's roster right now, it's 87% blue chip, which is number 1 in the country. Ohio State is second at 79%, and Georgia is at 78%. So it's just overwhelming talent. Miami, obviously, when they won national championships, would have been the same way if we had 247 sports and all these people doing these rankings. Miami is actually 13th in the country. They've got 40 blue chip players, and so they're right around 47%. One thing that I did that I kind of added to this little mix is, well, how many of these guys are true freshmen, guys that just got on the college campuses? Because most of the time, true freshmen, we know, don't have much of an impact. Well, 10 of Miami's 40 blue chip recruits just got on campus. So you trim that number down to 30, and all of a sudden, your veteran blue chip percentage for Miami shoots down a little bit to, let's see what I got it here, 35%. Now, again, these are all percentages, these are all numbers, but it's interesting to know because we all sit here, right, and just like to say, well, Miami's got enough talent. They should be one of the best teams in the country year in and year out. And yet, a team like Michigan is recruited just about equally with Miami, and they've made how many college football playoffs? One last year's. So in the end, it's the overwhelmingly talented teams. It's the Clemsons, it's the Ohio States, it's the Georgias, the Alabamas every single year. But it's good to know, at least going into this year, where Miami ranks. So part of my story was looking at the Coastal Division, right? Well, who else is talented in the Coastal, right? Who do you think is the second most talented team?
North Carolina.
North Carolina, and it's overwhelming. They've got 33 blue chip players, a lot of who will be playing as freshmen, first and second year freshmen this year, because they've got, just like Miami, 10 true freshmen that are part of their blue chip group. So, but some of those guys are going to get into the rotation at receiver and running back for them because they need those guys to play. But the whole point is it's kind of Miami and North Carolina from a talent perspective, and then there's a big drop off. Who do you think is the third most talented team
in the Coastal? I'd lean towards Pitt, but I think I'm going to be wrong. But I'll go Pitt.
It is not Pitt. It is Georgia Tech.
That's what I thought. I was going to say Georgia Tech, and I stopped myself.
Now, Georgia Tech is kind of stunning, right? Because they've had 3 straight 3-9 seasons, but their coach went out and he picked up 9 guys in the transfer portal that were former 4-star recruits from all over the place. Alabama, Auburn, he's got a bunch of kids from that area, from Georgia, that basically transferred back home. So Georgia Tech is the third most talented team. And then who do you think's fourth?
Can't be Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech is next on the list. They got 10 blue chip recruits, 4 of whom are all senior elder statesmen on their defense and starters. So they're actually and if you look at the recruiting class this year, they don't have any 4-star commitments. Brent Pry, who came over from Penn State, has had a hard trouble getting players from Virginia to commit. Penn State is actually getting all those great players out of the state of Virginia. So that's got to have to change for them if they're going to sort of start to turn things around. Pittsburgh is actually 5th. They've got 8 blue chip commitments. They're next on the list, but that just shows you what a tremendous job Pat Narduzzi does with that team every single year, where he doesn't get a bunch of blue chip kids. In fact, his best defensive player, you could argue, Servassier Dennis, is a 2-star recruit out of New York.
Asa Servassier.
Yes. And Kalijah Cansey and Habakkuk Baldonado, the other defensive end who was like
Baldonado's a bad boy.
Yeah, both of those kids were ranked in the 800s in their respective recruiting classes. So again, this shows you like, yes, Miami is a more talented team on the roster, but yet this guy is maximizing the talent that they have at Pittsburgh. Virginia is next on the list. They've got 7 blue chippers, and then Duke rounds it out with 2. There's only one Power 5 team in all of college football that doesn't have a blue chip recruit. You want to guess who that is?
All
Power
right, this
5.
is a and all of Power Five. I'm gonna say, oh shit, Vanderbilt.
Incorrect. It's Washington State, the only team
Oh,
without a
look at
blue
that.
chip recruit on the roster. So anyway, it's a little perspective because every year, well, we have the most talented team, right? Miami, we should win. We have the most talent. I would say right now, yes, Miami has the most talent, but you need to keep in mind that 10 of those 30 blue chippers are true freshmen, and that North Carolina is just about as talented as they are in terms of those blue chip elite kind of players. So, and Pittsburgh is the defending champion. They didn't need a lot of blue chip recruits. They just coached up really well. Anyway, it's a fun article. Check it out. It's on theathletic.com. It's a blue chip ratio story that I just put out. We do have a mailbag that we're going to get to, Carlos, in a couple minutes. So you can stick around for that. Another thing that I wrote this week was ranking the best players on the University of Miami. Did you get a chance to see that?
I did not. I've not read
Okay.
anything this week other than legal documents, which has pissed me off.
Well, I ended up writing this story on basically ranking the top 22 on Miami, from every perspective, just including units. I kind of lumped a few guys together in there because I didn't want, it was hard for me to sort of break some ties at certain positions, but I wanted to go over it with you here on the podcast because I wanted our listeners, in case they don't subscribe to The Athletic, to get a little bit of insight from that. Well, first of all, Tyler Van Dyke is the obvious number one. I wrote that without him, I don't know that they win more than 8 games this year. He's number one. But if you had to pick a unit or a player, who would you put number 2?
Okay, an entire unit, I would probably go with the defensive line.
Which is what I did. I put the entire defensive line as the number 2 most important player on the team, important player / unit. Obvious, a lot of depth at that position this year. I feel like that's really going to dictate whether or not this team is much better defensively. I think they will be because of that defensive line. Number 3 on the list, who would you put?
So we're talking about most important player, right? Or
most
unit.
Important player or unit, right? Valuable.
I'd throw the offensive line at 3.
Well, I had a couple of offensive linemen that come a little bit after this, but I went with Tyreek Stevenson at cornerback because I do feel like he is the true number 1 corner on this team. I know that people are saying he's going to play the star position, and I don't necessarily feel that way just yet. I feel like this is a guy who came to Miami to play cornerback, and I feel like he is the best cover man that they have. And most Saturdays when they play a good receiver, he's going to be on the outside covering that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he showed what he's capable of last year, even hampered with injuries. I think this year he's going to be even better.
All right. Number 4, I put Zion Nelson. Number 1, because I think he's their best offensive lineman. I think he when he comes back, he will be the left tackle, and that'll shift guys into better roles on the team. Number 5, I went with James Williams, the safety. I feel like he's probably the guy who's going to make the biggest plays for you on defense every single week, whether it's forcing fumbles, interceptions. To me, he is the playmaker in the secondary.
I would agree that he's a playmaker in the secondary. I think he has the potential to make the most big plays. Both him and Avonte Williams. I think Avonte Williams is also a very talented guy, but I think the most consistent guy is going to be Cam Kitchens. I think he's going to be the steady guy there in the secondary. The guy that's always going to, he might not be flashy, he might not be gaudy in the plays that he makes, but he's going to make every play that he gets a chance to make.
Number 6, I went with Jalen Rivers because I feel like in terms of being able to play multiple positions on the offensive line and being the second best offensive lineman, I think Jalen Rivers is that guy. I think he's going to be the pulling guard and a lot of, plays in terms of the running game. I think there's a high value with him. I think if Miami loses him again, that puts the offensive line in a precarious situation. I would say he's the next most valuable. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I could see that. I don't know about top 10, but he's definitely going to be an important piece on that offensive line. I think you're probably going to have to look at I think Xavier Restrepo might be at 6, hearing what we're hearing about the wide receivers.
Well, I went with
just
him at
because
7.
There you go. See what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Because he's going to have to be the guy that they find that consistency with.
right. I had him at 7. I put Jalen just a notch ahead of him because I think from an NFL perspective and just down the road, what he's going to mean maybe for the university. I think
Right.
Jalen
Yeah.
is a better player, but more valuable down the road. And I think for this season, they're both extremely valuable. Xavier, I think, has to be top 10 for that reason. And then at number 8, I went with Jalen Knighton. Obviously, he's the true number 1 running back on this team. I think Henry Parrish is going to be obviously heavily involved as well. But keeping him healthy all season is going to be a huge priority.
Yeah, and especially like we said with the issues of wide receiver, you need to find explosive plays in other areas. And Jalen Knighton has shown that he's effective in the passing game as well as running the football. So he's going to be huge for them in the passing game this year.
All right. And then number 9, I went with the tight ends. I went with Elijah Arroyo and Will Mallory in a tie because they're going to be on the field so much together in 2 tight end sets that it's sort
Yeah,
of a thunder and lightning type of approach with both of those guys. I think Arroyo will be involved heavily in the blocking. Mallory will be catching a lot of passes, but they're both extremely valuable in this offense.
yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And, especially like you said, the way Josh Gaddis runs this offense and now seeing that it's going to be a lot more like Michigan based on what's going on with the wide receivers, those guys are going to be critical.
All right. And to round out the 10, you can check out the article at The Athletic if you want to read the full list. But I went with a tie. I put Cameron Kitchens and Avante Williams, the 2 safeties, aside from James Williams, because I think both of them have their strength. I look at Cam Kitchens. He's kind of the Ed Reed of this defense. Just a guy who I think sees a lot back there. Avante is kind of a hybrid of James Williams and Cameron, that he can do a little bit of both, be really good in coverage and a big hitter. All 3 of those guys at safety to me are top 10 type players on this team.
Absolutely. And which is why, when you said initially a few shows ago when we talked about, you had spoken to Adai and he had said that those guys aren't going to be in the field together. And then later on that changed. We've seen comments from Kevin Steele saying that, yeah, we're going to play them in some packages together. They don't want to give it away. But
Right.
those guys are going to be on the field as much as possible together because those are your 3 most talented defensive backs aside from Tyreek Stevenson. And I think all 3 of them are probably more talented than Tyreek Stevenson as far as the roles that they play. Having those guys on the field together only makes you better. And they've shown the versatility with Cam Kitchens be able to cover in the slot and Avante Williams' athletic ability as well. James Williams being able to come down into the box, that you could use them together and make your defense even better.
Yeah, and in the end, 9 different personnel groupings. My bet is Tyreek Stevenson and the other 3 safeties are going to be on the field probably for all of them. You don't take
I
those
would say
guys.
so, at least most of them.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna get to the mailbag. Again, if you can subscribe to the Athletic, help me out. That would help. And certainly subscribe to the podcast here. At Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you get it, Spotify, etc. And make sure that you listen to Carlos's podcast as well, the MIA All Day Pod. How's that championship review going?
It hasn't been going lately, but I'll tell you what, I'm focused on finishing it today, and I'm going to try and put it out today or tomorrow.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I want the next chapter. All right, let's get to the mailbag questions. This is from Stephen Thunder, one of our favorite listeners, 56 Blaxican, as he likes to call himself on Twitter. Has Aaron Feld slept at all since he chugged that full cup of cafecito last month?
I highly doubt it. That man coming from the Northeast down here, he's probably been used to cold brews, French press coffee. He's been used to that weak shit. He got one hit of that cafecito, boy, and he was like Pookie from New Jack City. He hasn't let it go since.
Yeah, I can't imagine drinking that much coffee, especially now being diabetic. I'm pretty sure I'd be dead right now if that happened to me. So I can't drink that much coffee.
Especially Cuban coffee. Oof.
Yes. All right. This is from Andrew V_17 on Twitter. Could you see UM taking 2 running backs this cycle, given the injuries that have occurred in fall camp? Went from being deep to thin very quickly. I don't get the sense, and you can throw your 2 cents in here too, Carlos. I don't get the sense that this is reactionary with Mario Cristobal, where all of a sudden now we're going to take 2 running backs because Don Chaney Jr. got hurt again. I think everything is so fluid in recruiting with guys transferring out, etc. I think Miami could go through the whole season just trying to sign 1 running back in this class and then get to January and realize 2 of them are leaving out the door because they don't want to be here anymore. They want playing opportunity elsewhere. And then they got to take transfers from somebody else. It's just sort of
Yeah.
a how you go type of deal.
And I don't think Mario is going to compromise his what his qualifiers are for taking a recruit just to have an additional running back on the roster to fill out a roster spot. So he's not going to go pick up a 3-star just because the guy's available and he wants to come to UM to be able to have a little bit more depth in the running back room. I think he'd rather wait and see what's available in the transfer portal, pick up a veteran guy that's serviceable, that he knows what he can do, as opposed to just, downgrading what he looks for and just adding a body to add a body.
I would venture to say that at this point, every year you can count on your team probably taking one running back transfer, one quarterback transfer, one wide receiver transfer, and then potentially defensive line, because those are positions that year to year to year, the depth can change quickly, and you need to have depth at those positions. Offensive line is just hard to get guys in the transfer portal, quality guys. But I would say receiver, running back, quarterback, and defensive line are 3 areas or 4 areas rather, that you could find the kind of help you need to fill out your roster.
Yeah, I would add DB in there too. There's always a bunch of DBs in the portal and guys that can play.
All right. This is from Lorraine, 10-minute manicure on Twitter. What can we do to better protect the players against serious injuries? Well, I'll say this. It's very difficult in camp, especially when you're trying to go live and do some live tackling in camp, in scrimmages. Unfortunately, this is just a very violent sport. And practicing on Green Tree, it's well manicured. It's not a crappy field. I feel like the trainers do the best that they can precautionary wise to protect these guys. You see these guys wearing the helmet, the special helmet, the padding, all those kind of things. But sooner or later, you have to go live. You have to get some of those live tackling and live drills in. Mario mentioned this week that they're not doing it anymore because camp is over. But it's just bad luck sometimes. It's just part of the deal.
It is. And I mean, when you're having scrimmages and you're having full on contact, you can't account for everything. You can't control every environment. You can't control the environment completely. You can't control every factor. So sometimes things are going to happen like that. And especially when it comes to positions that are high contact positions like running back, sometimes there's just freak accidents. People get rolled up. Things happen.
All right. This is from Watch Me Work, Soldier_mind on Twitter. I want to know your thoughts about conference realignment. And if you had to choose, which do you choose, SEC or Big Ten, and why? I'll let you go first.
I mean, my thoughts are, I think eventually it's gonna happen. At some point, there's going to be just 4 mega conferences or 3 mega conferences, whatever the case may be. It may even just be 2 huge mega conferences between the Big Ten and SEC. To me, I'd prefer to be in the SEC, obviously, because of the geographic location of those schools, the history of football within the SEC, and how good the competition is. But I find it interesting to be in the Big Ten as well. I wouldn't mind. To me, the only issue would be, that second half of the season in those cold weather sites. To me, reminds me of the Dolphins Bills in the 90s, where you'd have a great season and then you'd shit the bed at the end because you had to go to Buffalo, New England.
Look, I just think there's one conference for Miami, and that's the SEC. If you're going to leave the ACC, it's for the SEC. And I think it's part of it is attendance. You talk about filling up that stadium, right, every single week. Well, if you played in the SEC, you would bring down fans from all over the southeastern part of the country to come to Miami. And I'm not saying that wouldn't happen with the Big Ten as well, but I just think there's a natural rivalry to having Miami, Alabama, Miami, Florida, Miami, Georgia. Like, that's something that would really, really take off. It wouldn't feel natural to have Miami, Wisconsin. It wouldn't feel natural to have,
especially since they've kicked our ass every single time we played them recently.
I just think for the fans, like we talked about the fans coming to games, are they going to show up for Rutgers? Are they going to show up for Illinois?
No, but you know what? We've had historic games against traditional Big Ten opponents like Michigan, Penn State. There have been rivalries against Big Ten teams from the past, and if they add Notre Dame, that would also play into that as well. So, I mean, at the end of the day, all this is speculation. This is all fantasy. Whenever it happens, it happens. Right now, what we got to deal with is the ACC. Let's go, Duke. I'm ready for that one.
All right. This is from Miami Matt, Miami_Matt on Twitter. How many wins do you think we need to keep this class and sign the next group of young men?
I'd say at least 9. At least.
I think I think anything less than getting to the ACC championship game, you put yourself in danger of losing recruits. So whether that's 9, 8, or 10, I don't know that that matters as much as the visual of winning your division and getting to Charlotte.
Well, I also think the optics of how you win the division matter also. If you back into it after a three-way tie and you've been struggling most of the season, you sort of back your way into the championship game, that's not a good look either.
No, but it's better than being left out and having 8 games and losing,
Right.
winning 8 games and going 8-4. So yeah, it'll be interesting. All right, this is from Vic Vassell, Coach Vic 4 on Twitter. Does Miami have a 1,000-yard wide receiver this year?
No. Next question.
Yeah, I don't think they have them this year, but I think they could have a 80 to 85 reception guy on this team in Xavier Restrepo. I could see that. I could see Xavier getting close to the school record for catches in the season.
I don't know. I think he's at his height. He's probably going to be somewhere around that 650, 700-yard mark. Probably averaging about 10 yards a catch. I'd be 60 to 70 catches.
All right. This is the last one from David Hernandez, D Hernan _ on Twitter. Will this offense be better, worse, or almost the same as last year when it comes to production, points per game, yards per game? Last year, there was a wide receiver 1, and it seems like there isn't one heading into week 1. Well, do you think they averaged what they did last year? I think it was right around 31 points a game.
I think they could average more. I think they could average more, not because of the receivers. They'll do it in spite of the receivers. But I think schematically, and the way they use tight ends and running backs, and the way Gaddis schemes defenses up, I think it'll be much better.
All right. I think your daughter's in the truck. It's probably time to go. How you doing, Sarah? Good to see you. How you guys doing? All right.
Sit down.
Well, I'll finish answering David's question and then we'll wrap this up, Carlos. Will this offense be better, worse, or almost the same? I think they're going to be better at running the football. I think the problem is going to be passing, obviously. And if that's the case, then they may not average as many points. Now, does that mean they're not going to win as much? I don't know. I think the defense is going to be a lot better. I think that's going to help them win more games. But I think production-wise, we're going to see fewer passing yards probably at this point, but more balance and probably more rushing yards for sure.
Well, I think the defense will aid in scoring more points as well because you're going to get shorter fields. You might get more turnovers and things of that nature. So you'll get more possessions. So I think the defense will help in that sense. And they won't be giving up as many long drives as they have in the past. So I think the offense will have the opportunity to score more points just based off that.
All right. Carlos, thanks for participating yet again, helping me with this preseason podcast. We'll catch up again soon. Make sure you follow Carlos on Twitter and make sure to download his podcast, MIA All Day Podcast as well. Any final thought as we hang up here?
No, man. Just let's go Canes. Ready for the season to start.
All right, brother. You take care.
Later.